Here, that is smoke from a bomb dropped by an airplane. Now, when these films were new, you could see the airplane, but it's all faded out now. But I was passing by there on my way to Saigon, and I saw this aircraft doing a little dive bombing, and so I took some film of it. This was the headquarters at Train Compound, which was for the advisors in Bien Hoa. And I took about a 3-day R&R and went up there, and the tennis court you see back there in the back, that's where I learned to play tennis, and it is referenced in the book. Now this right here, you can see right here, that's a Jeep trailer turned upside down. And that's what the battalion commander would use as his jail. If one of his soldiers was misbehaving, he'd stick him underneath that Jeep trailer out in the hot sun all day long. A bunch of helicopters taking off there, going off on a mission. Now, this helicopter here, I showed you a while ago, the Viet Cong had dropped that bridge into the river. Took a while, but the Vietnamese engineers rebuilt it, and so we had a bridge dedication ceremony there. And the guy that cut the ribbon dedicating the new bridge was no less than Nguyen Cao Ky, who was the premier of South Vietnam at the time. This helicopter here is flying in security for this bridge ceremony, and we, of course, as the battalion that garrisoned the village at Can Giuc, we were out there as security too. This little girl lived right next door to us while I was stationed in Can Giuc. I used to draw pictures for these kids, and they just fascinated them. I'd draw little cartoon characters of Mickey Mouse and Goofy and so forth, and they loved it. That little girl said she was 9 years old, when in fact she was 8. Vietnamese considered themselves to be a year old when they were born. And that guy right there was Tak, my interpreter. Now this is dawn, the morning of Operation Concordia, which you can actually Google, find out a little bit about it. But there's some Navy rag boats coming in to pick us up to take us to our role in Operation Concordia. And this is the headquarters element coming off the little boat there at what we called Beach Purple. That guy is Sergeant Hooper. He's on his 3rd war. And soon after we got on the ground, we found a couple of Viet Cong soldiers in a hole in the ground with a couple of rifles. And all that's mentioned in the book. And this guy right here with the sunglasses on, that's our assistant battalion commander, and he had just gotten through beating the living tar out of this Viet Cong fellow. I tried to get him to do it again, but all he did was point at him, so he's not really hitting him there. That's another one. These people owned the house that those guys were hiding in, so they took them in, arrested them as VC sympathizers. And this helicopter had just been shot down. There's a big battle going on over in the trees there a little ways away. You can see them in the distance. And we had to come and secure the machine guns and the pilot and his crew until this Chinook could come by and Oops. Haul it away. That's a 60 millimeter mortar. And we had headquartered at this little house there. It had been used as a VC hospital for a while. And we found all kinds of medical supplies in there. The M16, you see that guy holding, we'd killed a VC that morning and took the rifle off of him, and I used it the rest of the time I was in Vietnam. We stayed there for quite a while. In fact, we were there for a couple of days straight, and this is my advisory team. I'm stopping it right here. This young man right here, in the book you'll see him referred to as Sam. Sam is not his real name. He had been a lieutenant in the army, in the Vietnamese army up farther north, and apparently was working for a captain who was not a well-liked fella. He was kind of dangerous. So this young man here told us, he trusted us. We were Americans, and we weren't going to narc on him or anything. But he told us that the first time they got into a firefight, he popped around in the back of this captain's head and took off and went down to Saigon, deserted. And the Vietnamese military police saw him walking along the streets in Saigon and saw he's military age, wasn't in uniform, so they snatched him up, put him back in the army. So he wound up as an interpreter for us, as a private, instead of being the lieutenant that he used to be. But they didn't have the computers or a sophisticated system for keeping track of whoever or whatever. So that was his story. While we were taking pictures in the front yard, this guy was caught in the backyard trying to escape the area. He turned out to be a Viet Cong company commander. Right over in the distance there, in those palm trees, we spied a Viet Cong bunker complex over there, called in some airstrikes, and these aircraft are diving and strafing and bombing and making all kinds of fuss over there. They finally run out of ordnance. Now you can see a little bit of the dark smoke coming up over the top of those trees there. That's about maybe 100, 125 yards away from us. And these guys kept busy at that bunker complex until they ran out of armament. They had to go back and rearm and refuel. So we're sitting there watching it like it was a drive-in movie or something. And while they were gone, I decided to take a little bit more footage of what the real estate around there looked like. We ran out of supplies, and this is discussed in the book. We were in this location here. We couldn't move, so we wound up living off of the trees, eating the coconuts and bananas till they ran out. Now these guys came back with bigger ordnance, as you can see. It's throwing that dirt and stuff a little bit higher in the air. Boom. Now we're on our way back, walking across a very slick log that's just under the water. You can't see it. And I told you that I'd look a little skinny later on in the film, and this is what I was talking about. And you compare this with the way I looked in the previous part of the film when I was in Kanjuk. Now you can see things are a little bit greener. This is the monsoon season. The rice is planted down there. You can see how green it is. These guys used to fly at maybe, 1,200, 1,500 feet above the ground. If you were flying with a CIA helicopter, they were a lot higher, maybe 3,000 feet or higher. And here I'm just coming into Saigon. That is a base camp called Bearcat. You can see some artillery emplacements down there. That's just open woods. Yeah, flying into a base camp there. U.S. infantry base camp. Door gunner. A lot of aerial views because I've spent a lot of time in helicopters, which is one reason why I wound up with 2 air medals. Anyway, this is coming into Saigon. It was a city of 5 million people back then. And really was about the safest place in the entire country until the 1968 Tet Offensive. If you ever read any history about this Vietnam War, that's the racetrack. You might see it referred to. A lot of tin roofs. And we're coming into Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base. Coming to a hover, and boom, we'll sit down, I think. Yeah, there it goes. That's the helicopter I was riding in whenever I took all that film. A lot of people call the Bell helicopter the workhorse of Vietnam. Now this is actually in Bien Hoa, and it's a sector headquarters where there was a company of I think regional force soldiers that was securing this sector headquarters, and a fellow that I used to be stationed with, the guy by the name of Jerry Blackwood, had a wife who was in a sorority of some kind back here in the States, and they had donated a bunch of clothing to these people here, and so we had taken all those boxes and taken it over to the sector headquarters. That's Jerry with his back to us, and that's me over there on the other side. And for a while, everything was nice and well organized, and kids would come up there to us, and we'd try to match size and try to get something that looked pretty nice. You can see some little balsa wood airplanes as well. They had sent some toys over, and we were giving the boys little airplanes, and the girls, we were giving them some dolls or whatever we had. Now, if you notice, all these kids and all the families and all the mama sons, they're all getting a little bit closer to us. Finally got to the point where they were sticking their hand in front of our faces, and we'd hand them something, and they'd put it behind them, and they'd stick their other hand in front of our face, and we didn't know who was who or whatever, and they were getting us so close, we were getting a little claustrophobic, and we finally just backed off and let them fight over everything. And that was all that was left by the time they got done. They even took the cardboard boxes. And we're coming up to a hover and taking off. Pilot would get up pretty close to 100 miles an hour, and then he'd pull back on the stick and we'd go straight up. In the distance there, I think you can see a mountain that was called Nui Ba Den in Tay Ninh province. And these little outposts you can see is a kind of a triangular shape. They were built that way because you could put a machine gun on each point and crisscross your fire across your front if you were attacked. And we're going into inspect an outpost here in a little while. I'd already been transferred up to Benoit. I was away from the battalion.